Self-care is not rebellion against God, and it is not a betrayal of your calling. It is wisdom wrapped in obedience. Somewhere along the journey, you learn to associate holiness with neglecting yourself. You were praised for being available, applauded for being exhausted, and admired for giving even when you had nothing left. But wisdom says this: God does not benefit from your burnout. He is not glorified by your collapse. He is not impressed by your suffering when it comes from ignoring your limits. Self-care is not choosing yourself over God. It is choosing to steward what God placed in your hands. Your mind, your body, your soul with intention and reverence. Spiritual wisdom understands seasons. It knows when to pour out, and it knows when to pull back. Self-care teaches discernment, not indulgence. There is a difference between rest and avoidance, between renewal and escape. Wisdom allows you to pause long enough to hear God clearly instead of drowning out his voice with constant activity. When you care for yourself, you are not saying, "I don't trust God." You are saying, "I trust him enough to stop striving." Wisdom does not rush to prove devotion. It rests in identity. And identity says you are already loved, already chosen, already seen, without running yourself into the ground. Self-care becomes spiritual when you realize your limits were designed, not accidental. God built boundaries into your humanity on purpose. You need sleep. You need silence. You need moments where no one is asking anything from you. Ignoring those needs does not make you stronger. It makes you brittle. Wisdom listens to the signals your body sends before it becomes a breakdown. It recognizes that caring for yourself today prevents crisis tomorrow. Self-care says, "I will not wait until I am broken to be obedient." That is not weakness. That is maturity rooted in faith. There is also wisdom in understanding that constantly rescuing others can slowly destroy you. Self-care teaches you that you are not the savior. You were never meant to be. When you neglect yourself to fix everyone else, you quietly place yourself in a position only God should occupy. Wisdom steps back and says, "I can love without losing myself." Self-care does not harden your heart, it clarifies it. It helps you give from overflow instead of obligation, from compassion instead of resentment, from strength instead of survival. Spiritual wisdom knows that peace is not laziness. Peace is alignment. Self-care aligns you with truth instead of pressure. It reminds you that your worth is not measured by productivity, availability, or sacrifice. Wisdom whispers that rest is not earned, it is received. When you choose self-care, you choose to believe that God can still move even when you stop pushing. That belief requires faith. Real faith trusts God enough to lie down, to breathe, to step away, and to know the world will not fall apart without you holding it together. Self-care also sharpens your discernment. When you are rested, you hear better. When you are healed, you choose better. When you are whole, you love better. Wisdom understands that exhaustion distorts perception. It makes everything feel heavier, louder, more urgent than it truly is. Caring for yourself clears the fog. It helps you distinguish between what is truly required and what is simply expected. Spiritual wisdom does not confuse urgency with importance. It knows that sometimes the most faithful response is to pause and let God work while you recover. Ultimately, self-care is an act of trust. It declares that you believe God is a sustainer, not a taskmaster. It says you trust his grace more than your effort. Wisdom understands that your life is sacred, not disposable. When you take care of yourself, you are not stepping out of faith, you are stepping deeper into it. You are acknowledging that the same God who calls you to serve also calls you to live, to breathe, to heal, and to remain whole. Exhaustion has been mistaken for evidence of devotion for far too long. You were taught subtly, sometimes loudly, that if you were tired, you must be doing something right, that if your schedule was packed, your body aching, your spirit worn thin, then surely God was pleased. But exhaustion is not a spiritual badge, it is a signal. Faith was never meant to drain the life out of you. It was meant to anchor you in life. God does not measure your belief by how depleted you feel at the end of the day. He measures it by whether you trust him enough to stop when he says stop. There is nothing holy about being constantly overwhelmed. Burnout does not mean you are obedient. It often means you have ignored wisdom for too long. Exhaustion clouds judgment. It blurs boundaries. It makes you confuse urgency with importance and noise with calling. When you are exhausted, you say yes to things God never assigned to you simply because you are too tired to discern. Faith sharpens clarity. Exhaustion dulls it. If something consistently leaves you empty, angry, resentful, or disconnected, it may not be a test. It may be a warning. True faith understands that God is not impressed by overextension. He is not standing in heaven applauding your sleepless nights and neglected health. He is concerned about the parts of you that are silently suffering while you perform strength for others. Exhaustion often comes from trying to be everything for everyone, forgetting that God never asked you to carry what belongs to him. Faith does not say, I will do it all. Faith says, I will do what I am called to do and trust God with the rest. There is also a difference between sacrifice and self-abandonment. Sacrifice has purpose. It has boundaries. It has seasons. Self-abandonment is endless. It has no pause, no recovery, no care for the cost. Exhaustion thrives where self-abandonment lives. Faith never required you to disappear. God did not design you to be constantly accessible, endlessly available, and perpetually strong. When you believe exhaustion equals faithfulness, you silently teach yourself that your needs do not matter. But faith never erases your humanity. It redeems it. Exhaustion can even become a hiding place. When you are always busy, you never have to sit with what hurts. When you are always serving, you never have to address what is broken. But faith invites honesty, not avoidance. God is not asking you to stay exhausted to avoid healing. He is calling you into wholeness, and wholeness requires rest, reflection, and sometimes uncomfortable stillness. Faith is not proven by how much you do. It is proven by how deeply you trust God when you do less. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything. It is part of obedience. Exhaustion says, I can't stop. Faith says, I don't have to keep going to be valuable. When you rest, you are declaring that God is capable without your constant effort. That declaration takes courage. It takes faith to believe that things will still work out when you pause, when you log off, when you say no. Exhaustion tries to convince you that everything depends on you. Faith reminds you that it never did. If exhaustion were proof of faith, peace would be a problem. Joy would be suspicious. Balance would be questioned. But God is not threatened by your peace. He is not offended by your rest. He is not asking you to prove loyalty by destroying yourself. Faith is not heavy chains. It is a steady anchor. And anchors do not exhaust ships. They stabilize them. When you release the belief that exhaustion equals faithfulness, you make room for a faith that sustains you instead of consuming you. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you. They are doors meant to protect you. When you set a boundary, you are not rejecting people. You are respecting the life God formed within you. Too often, boundaries are painted as unloving, unspiritual, or selfish, especially when you have been conditioned to overgive. But honoring God's creation means acknowledging that you are not limitless. God shaped you with intention, with capacity, with design. Ignoring those limits does not make you faithful. It makes you careless with something sacred. Boundaries say, I value what God values, and God values you. When you refuse to set boundaries, you silently teach others how to treat you. You communicate that your time, your energy, and your peace are always available, even at the cost of your well-being. That is not humility. That is self-neglect disguised as kindness. Boundaries restore balance. They help you serve without resentment and love without losing yourself. God never asked you to be endlessly accessible. Even He does not answer every request immediately. Boundaries mirror divine wisdom. They reflect order, not rejection. Honoring God's creation also means recognizing that not everyone deserves the same level of access to you. Boundaries help you discern proximity. Everyone does not need to be close to your heart. Everyone does not get your vulnerability. Everyone does not get unlimited time. That does not make you hard. It makes you wise. God himself had inner circles. He trusted selectively. Boundaries are not about punishment. They are about protection. They protect your peace, your purpose, and your ability to show up fully where you are truly called. Boundaries also confront guilt. The guilt that tells you saying no makes you a bad PE. Son, the guilt that whispers you are disappointing God when you prioritize your health. But guilt is not a voice of wisdom, it is a voice of fear. Boundaries teach you to separate responsibility from obligation. You can care without carrying. You can love without fixing. You can support without sacrificing your mental and emotional stability. God never intended for you to carry weights that crush you. Boundaries help you put down what was never yours to hold. There is a sacredness in saying no. No to conversations that drain you. No to relationships that wound you. No to expectations that steal your peace. Boundaries create space for healing. They allow you to rest without apology. They remind you that your worth is not tied to how much you tolerate. God does not ask you to endure harm to prove obedience. Boundaries honor the truth that you are worthy of safety, clarity, and respect. That truth comes from God, not from people. When boundaries are absent, burnout is not far behind. You become overextended, emotionally exhausted, spiritually numb. Boundaries prevent that slow erosion of the soul. They allow you to show up refreshed instead of resentful, available instead of angry, present instead of depleted. Honoring God's creation means maintaining what he created. You maintain a body with rest. You maintain a mind with peace. You maintain a spirit with space. Boundaries are maintenance, not rejection. Setting boundaries requires faith because it means trusting God with the outcomes. It means believing that you will not lose what is meant for you by protecting yourself. It means trusting that the right people will respect your limits and the wrong ones will reveal themselves. Boundaries align you with God's heart because they preserve what he formed with care. When you honor your boundaries, you honor his work. Rest is not a human invention, it is a divine prank. Ipo. Long before culture glorified busyness, heaven established rhythm. Rest was woven into creation itself, not as an afterthought, but as a command rooted in love. God did not wait for exhaustion to appear before introducing rest. He modeled it, he approved it, he sanctified it. When you rest, you are not stepping outside of God's will, you are stepping into a pattern he already declared good. Rest is not optional in heaven's economy, it is essential. Somewhere along the way, rest became associated with laziness, and striving became confused with purpose. But rest does not mean you lack ambition, it means you have alignment. Heaven is not impressed by how busy you are. Heaven is concerned with whether you are whole. Rest allows your body to recover, your mind to reset, and your spirit to realign. Without rest, you operate on survival instead of wisdom. God does not want you merely surviving your calling. He wants you sustained within it. Rest requires trust. It takes faith to stop moving when the work feels unfinished. It takes courage to pause when everything around you is demanding more. Rest says, I believe God can work while I sleep. That belief challenges the lie that everything depends on you. Heaven approves rest because rest acknowledges sovereignty. It declares that God is in control even when you step back. When you refuse to rest, you quietly take on a role you were never meant to carry. Rest puts that weight back where it belongs. There is also a difference between collapsing and resting. Collapsing happens when you push past your limits until your body forces you to stop. Rest is intentional. It is chosen. It is preventative. Heaven approves rest because it protects you from unnecessary damage. God does not want to meet you only in recovery. He wants to walk with you in rhythm. Rest allows you to hear God's voice without distortion. Fatigue muffle discernment, but rest sharpens it. Rest is not retreat, it is renewal. It is not quitting, it is refueling. When you rest, you are preparing for what comes next. Heaven understands timing. Seasons of rest often precede seasons of elevation, but if you ignore rest, you may miss the strength required for the next assignment. God does not rush growth, He develops it. Rest creates space for that development to happen without pressure. Rest also confronts pride. It forces you to admit that you are human, that you have limits, that you need care. Heaven approves rest because humility invites grace. When you rest, you are no longer performing strength, you are receiving it. God's strength shows up best when you stop pretending you have enough of your own. Rest creates room for divine renewal instead of human striving. When heaven approves something, it does not come with guilt attached. Rest does not require justification. You do not have to explain why you need it. You do not need permission from people who benefit from your exhaustion. Heaven already approved it. Rest is not a delay. It is divine alignment, and alignment always leads to clarity, strength, and peace. Healing is not a failure of faith. It is often the evidence of it. Somewhere along the journey, you learn to hide your wounds instead of tending to them. You learn to smile through pain, to pray through trauma, and to call survival strength. But God is not impressed by what you can endure in silence. He is moved by honesty. Healing does not make God uncomfortable. Your tears do not threaten Him. Your questions do not offend Him. He is not disappointed that you need time, support, or help to become whole. God never expected you to carry pain forever. What He allows you to survive is not always what He intends you to live with. Healing is an invitation, not a rejection. It is God saying you do not have to stay here. When you pursue healing, you are not walking away from God, you are walking with Him into freedom. Silence may look spiritual, but unaddressed pain has a way of shaping your life in unhealthy ways. God does not ask you to ignore what hurts. He asks you to bring it to Him. Healing also challenges the lie that faith means pretending everything is fine. Real faith tells the truth. It admits when something is broken. It acknowledges when wounds still ache. God does not require perfection before He offers peace. He meets you in process. Therapy, counseling, rest, reflection, and community are not signs that your faith is weak. They are tools God can use to restore what was damaged. Healing does not compete with prayer. It often completes it. There are people who benefited from your brokenness. They were comfortable when you were silent, compliant, and overgiving. Healing changes that. It gives you a voice. It gives you clarity. It gives you strength to say no where you once said yes out of fear. That shift can feel uncomfortable, but God is not disappointed when you outgrow survival mode. He celebrates transformation. Healing may disrupt relationships, but it restores you. And God always values your wholeness over your convenience to others. Healing takes time, and God is not rushing you. He is patient with your pace. He understands that some wounds are deep, layered, and complex. You are not behind because you still feel pain. You are not weak because you need help. God does not compare your journey to anyone else's. Healing is not linear, and setbacks do not cancel progress. God stays present through every step, not just the polished ones. Choosing healing requires courage. It means facing memories you buried, emotions you avoided, and truths you denied. But God is not afraid of what you will uncover. He already knows. Healing is not about reopening wounds to suffer again. It is about cleaning them so they can finally close. God does not shame you for needing healing. He offers grace for the process. God is not disappointed by your healing because your healing reflects His heart. He is a restorer. He is a healer. He is a redeemer. When you choose healing, you align with who He is. You are not abandoning faith. You are embodying it. You were never created to function endlessly without pause. A machine can run until it breaks and be replaced. A vessel is different. A vessel is meant to carry something precious. It requires care, attention, and intentional handling. When you forget that you are a vessel, you begin to treat yourself like a tool, useful only for output, performance, and productivity. But God did not design you to be consumed by constant demand. He designed you to carry purpose, and purpose requires preservation. A machine is valued for what it produces. A vessel is valued for what it holds. When you reduce yourself to a machine, you start believing your worth is tied to how much you can do, how much you can give, and how much you can endure. But your value was established before you ever lifted a finger. God did not form you to be endlessly drained. He formed you to be filled. When a vessel is empty, it cannot pour. When it is cracked, what it carries is lost. Caring for yourself protects what God placed inside you. Being a vessel means understanding that you have capacity, not limitlessness. There is only so much you can carry at one time. Ignoring that truth does not make you faithful, it makes you fragile. Overloading a vessel does not increase its usefulness, it increases the risk of breaking. God is not asking you to carry everything, fix everyone, or solve every problem. He assigns portions, not burdens that crush. When you respect your capacity, you honor the wisdom of your design. Machines do not feel, they do not grieve, they do not process pain, but you do. When you ignore your emotions, you treat yourself like something mechanical instead of human. God created your emotional world on purpose. Your feelings are not flaws, they are signals. Being a vessel means paying attention to those signals before damage occurs. Suppressed emotions eventually leak out through exhaustion, irritability, anxiety, and numbness. God does not want you running on fumes while calling it strength. A vessel must be refilled regularly. You cannot pour from yesterday's strength into today's demands. What sustained you in one season may not sustain you in another. Machines repeat cycles. Vessels require renewal. Prayer, rest, joy, boundaries, and silence are not luxuries. They are refilling stations. When you neglect refilling, you do not become more spiritual. You become depleted. God never intended for your life to be an endless outflow with no intake. Understanding yourself as a vessel also changes how you respond to pressure. Instead of forcing yourself to push harder, you learn to pause and assess. Is this too much? Is this mine to carry? Is this season requiring a different pace? That awareness is wisdom. God does not reward self-destruction. He honors stewardship. A well-tended vessel lasts longer and carries more effectively over time. You are not replaceable in the way a machine is. You are irreplaceable. There is only one you carrying a unique purpose. Treating yourself with care is not indulgence. It is respect for the craftsmanship of God. When you remember you are a vessel, you stop trying to prove your worth through exhaustion and start protecting what God trusted you with. You have spent too much of your life waiting for approval to do what keeps you alive, waiting for someone to validate your rest, waiting for someone to bless your boundaries, waiting for Mion to affirm your need to pause, heal, and protect your spirit. But here is the truth. You do not need anyone's permission. Your life, your body, your peace, and your soul are not up for negotiation. God already gave the authorization. Heaven already said yes. Waiting for humans to approve what God approves is a delay you cannot afford. Self-care is not negotiable, and it is not optional. It is sacred. People may judge you, misunderstand you, or even resist your choices. That is part of living in a world that thrives on depletion. But human approval is temporary, conditional, and often flawed. It comes and goes depending on mood, perspective, or self-interest. God's approval, on the other hand, is eternal, unwavering, and rooted in love. When you rely on human validation to care for yourself, you risk compromise. When you rely on divine approval, you gain confidence. You do not need anyone to allow you to breathe. You do not need anyone to say it is okay to say no. You do not need anyone to justify that you need space. Every time you pause, every time you choose rest, every time you protect your boundaries, you are exercising the authority God already gave you. You are not being selfish, you are being faithful. Faithfulness to yourself is not rebellion, it is obedience. Relying on human permission creates chains. Chains of guilt, chains of overcommitment, chains of silent suffering. People may not understand why you step back. They may not celebrate your need to heal. Some may even resist it, but your responsibility is not to make them comfortable. Your responsibility is to steward what God entrusted to you. Human approval is fleeting. God's guidance is forever. When you operate under divine permission, you are free to honor your life without apology. There is power in claiming your right to self-care without asking for consent. It is a declaration that you value yourself because God values you. It is a statement that your peace, your mental health, and your soul's well-being are not negotiable. Waiting for permission teaches dependence on people who cannot sustain you. Walking in the freedom of God's approval teaches independence rooted in truth. You are allowed to prioritize your health, your joy, and your growth without consulting every voice around you. Refusing to seek human permission also protects you from exploitation. When you wait for others to say yes, you open the door to manipulation, guilt, and overextension. When you operate with God's approval as your authority, you set a standard that cannot be compromised. You create a life that honors divine intention rather than human expectation. God did not create you to live at the mercy of others' approval. He created you to walk confidently in His blessing. Finally, knowing you do not need human permission empowers you to live boldly. Boldness does not mean arrogance, it means confidence. Confidence in your worth, in your boundaries, in your right to rest and heal. When you care for yourself without seeking consent, you inspire others to do the same. You demonstrate that divine approval is enough. You show that self-care is not a luxury, it is a mandate. And when you live this way, you reflect the truth. Your life is sacred, your peace is necessary, and God has already given you permission to protect both.